I mean, building a few components is one thing, but architecting a scalable, secure, and high-performance application? That's a whole different ballgame. Let's explore what that really takes.
And that's because, it's really more than just components these days. Modern React has evolved into this rich ecosystem of patterns, tools, and critical architectural decisions. This is the stuff that defines a professional developer. So let's dive right in.
Okay, so let's start at the very core, right? The magic behind the UI. We have to nail down these fundamental concepts because, honestly, everything else we're going to talk about builds right on top of this foundation. A solid understanding here is absolutely crucial.
All right, first up, let's clear up something that trips up a ton of developers. The virtual DOM versus the shadow DOM. They sound kind of similar, but they solve completely different problems. The shadow DOM is a browser thing, a native API. Think of it like a little self-contained bubble for your component, keeping its styles and logic from leaking out and messing with the rest of the page. The virtual DOM, on the other hand, that's React's secret sauce. It's a copy of the real DOM that lives in memory, allowing React to figure out the most efficient way to make updates. They're two very different, very specialized tools.
Okay, next up, how does your app actually show up in the browser? You've got two main flavors here. With server-side rendering, or SSR, the server does the heavy lifting and sends a complete HTML page. This is fantastic for that initial fast load and for search engines. The only catch is, the page is just a pretty picture until the JavaScript loads in to make it interactive. On the flip side, you have client-side rendering, or CSR. Here, the server just sends a bare-bones HTML file, and your browser's JavaScript builds the entire UI from scratch. It can be simpler to set up, but that first time to content can feel a little slower for the user. It's all about trade-offs.
All right, now for what was probably the biggest shakeup in React's entire history, the jump from class components to functional components with hooks. And this wasn't just a simple syntax change. Oh no, it was a fundamental shift in how we think about and write our component logic and state. And when you map them out like this, you can really see the new way of thinking. We're moving away from thinking in rigid phases like mounting or updating. Instead, hooks get us to think about synchronizing our component with some external system. Componented mount? That's just a useEffect that runs once. Componented update? That's a useEffect that reruns whenever its dependencies change. And component will unmount? That's just a cleanup function you return from your effect. It's a much more declarative and, honestly, intuitive model once you get the hang of it.
And this is why it's such a massive improvement. Look at this. With class components, your logic was all over the place. You'd fetch data in component did mount, then have to duplicate similar logic in component did update, and then put your cleanup code in a totally separate component will unmount method. It was a mess. But with useEffect, bam! It's all in one spot. The setup, the effect itself, and the cleanup, all co-located. It makes the code so much cleaner and just easier to follow.
So, now that our components are way cleaner, we can turn our attention to the next big monster in any growing application: state management. How do we wrangle all our data and keep it flowing predictably as our app gets more complex?
Oh man, we've all been there, right? You start by passing a prop down to a child component. Then that child needs to pass it to its child. Before you know it, you're passing data down through 5 layers of components. That's prop drilling, and it is a real pain. But thankfully, we have much better solutions now.
So, in the world of React, there are really two main contenders for solving this problem: React's own built-in context API and the classic library, Redux. Here's the high-level breakdown. Context is awesome because it's built-in and it's super easy to learn, but it's not really optimized for state that updates all the time. Redux, on the other hand, requires a bit more setup, but it comes with incredible developer tools like time travel debugging, middleware for handling things like API calls, and it's built for performance at scale.
So when should you reach for the context API? Well, it's perfect for simple, global state that doesn't change very often. Think of things like a theme switcher for dark mode and light mode, or maybe the logged-in user's information. It's a fantastic, lightweight solution that's ideal for smaller apps or when you're just getting a project off the ground.
Good, when things get serious, that's when you bring in the big guns, Redux. If your app state looks like a giant, complicated spider web, or if you need to handle complex asynchronous logic, you're going to want the structure Redux provides. And if you're on a large team where debugging state changes is critical, those Redux dev tools are an absolute lifesaver. It's really built for complexity and scale.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. We've talked components, we've talked state. Now let's talk about the whole shebang, the architecture of your entire application. How do we structure things from the get-go to avoid that dreaded spaghetti code down the line?
This quote just nails it. It really, really does. Good architecture isn't about creating some super complex, rigid system. It's about setting up your project in a way that makes doing the right thing the easy thing for everyone on the team. It guides you toward making good choices.
So what's a modern way to do this? Well, a really popular one gaining a lot of traction is called Feature Slice Design, or FSD. The core idea is simple but powerful. Instead of organizing your files by type, like having a components folder and a hooks folder, you organize your code by business features. This makes your code base so much more modular and way easier to scale.
And FSD does this with a really smart layered system. At the very bottom, you have your shared layer, which is stuff that can be used by anyone anywhere, like your UI button component. Then you build on top of that with entities, like a user or a product. Then features, like add to cart. You compose those into widgets and pages. The golden rule is you can only depend on layers below you. That's the secret sauce that keeps everything from turning into a tangled mess.
All right, we've covered a ton of ground, from the guts of React all the way up to architecture. To finish things off, let's do a quick lightning round on two things that truly mark a professional developer: security and performance. This is the polish. When it comes to security, these are absolute non-negotiables. First off, React's curly braces for rendering data, that's your first line of defense against XSS attacks. Use them. If you absolutely have to insert raw HTML with dangerously set inner HTML, you sanitize it first with something like DOM Purify. No exceptions. Always validate URLs, regularly scan your dependencies for known vulnerabilities, and for goodness sake, keep your React version up to date.
And on the performance side, React 18 gave us some incredible new tools. Automatic batching is huge. It groups multiple state updates together into a single re-render, which means a faster app. Simple as that. The use transition hook is amazing too. It lets you tell React, hey, this update isn't super urgent, so don't block the user's typing while you do it. It's a game changer for keeping your UI feeling snappy. And streaming SSR with suspense gets content on the screen faster for your users. These are massive wins.
Okay, so theory is great, but the only way to really make all this stuff stick is to get your hands dirty and build something. So here's your next challenge. Pick one of these. Try to fetch some data. Build a simple counter. Manage state between a parent and child. Seriously, actually coding it is where the real learning happens.
So now you've got the playbook. You know what it takes to be a modern React developer, from the core engine to pro-level patterns and security. So the only question left is,